In a day and age when the power of young people is being recognized worldwide in many arenas of life, it is so important to ask ourselves some fundamental questions. In a day when entitlement is valued over sacrifice, when it is so critical for us to focus on ourselves as young people, as yourselves as young people, are there other variables, other factors that we need to pay attention to? I would like to offer you a thought that you might like to consider. In your life and impact as young person, whichever arena God has placed you in, your character really matters. I want to look at the question of your integrity. Integrity matters. Today, integrity in public and private life comes at a very high premium. It is not easily seen in many of our public life conversations. You and I are so aware of this, not just in India but all over the world. It is a big issue. And it is a question of clear conscience. It is a question about whether I live a life of duplicity or do I live a life of integrity. Dishonesty is not simply the opposite of integrity. Duplicity is the opposite of integrity. This means that we take much more energy to maintain a life of duplicity than of integrity. I want to share with you 3 principles from a life that I have valued in the Bible. This is the life of Joseph. Joseph is someone who you could easily resonate with, someone who was a leader when he was a young person. And very interestingly, Joseph was not one of those families that gave him natural advantage to come up in life. He was at a disadvantage when he started to become a ruler in an alien land to complicate things. In spite of it, all these negatives, Joseph maintained a life of high integrity. I want to offer you 3 principles for your consideration as you look at your integrity that matters, both in public life and in private life. The first principle that I would like to offer is to recognize that our accountability is to both God and man. We do not have a choice. We do not have a choice to say, okay, I'm only accountable to God, so that forget our responsibility to humans, or the other way around. That choice is not available if you and I should live a life that is not marked by duplicity. Integrity recognizes that we are accountable to both God and man. It is both critical for us and also to recognize that your faith, we need to have a religion that is not simply private. That I can say it's a private affair and I live my life in privacy, but also to recognize that this is a life that must make an impact in public life. Joseph knew this almost straight away. He knew that there is no possibility of living a private life and a different life in the public domain. That is not possible. That actually is the beginning of a disaster when it comes to integrity. The second principle that Joseph brings to us is a recognition that sacred and material are not 2 separate aspects of life. It is a myth. Very often the world tries to sell us that there is a bucket or an area of our life which can be called sacred, which is so different and separated from material. Joseph clearly says that that is not possible. Where you are today, whichever walk of life you are placed by God, is a sacred space. It's almost as though you'll have to walk into these sacred spaces with your feet, without any footwear, because you're walking in sacred space. It's an area where God resides. You and I, there is no area in our life which can say this is material and God has no control. The God of the Bible clearly tells us He's a God for whom all areas of life are under His control. Very often we fool ourselves by saying there is a sacred and a material. Joseph clearly says every aspect of his life, even when he is alone, it's a sacred space. Your work, your college, your school, wherever you are, in your family, with your friends, in your neighborhood, in a nation, in a city, you walk in sacred space, demanding high standards of integrity. The third area I would like to place before you as you looking at the issue of integrity is to recognize that there is a creator who is not just simply sovereign, but a creator who is personal. A creator with whom I can build a relationship. A creator with whom I can trust and be dependent on. If you and I do not have a God who is personal, integrity would be always the first casualty. It is important for us to recognize that you and I have a God on whom we can depend. This God walks with us wherever we are. You and I are not alone to fend for ourselves and establish our integrity. We actually walk into public domain, into our private areas of our relationships to recognize that there is a God on whom we can depend. This God walks with us. Actually, this God is already involved. You and I simply follow him in obedience. 3 principles from the life of Joseph. First, recognize accountability is to both God and man. Second, recognize it is a myth when we say there is a sacred area of our life that is separate from our material. Third, also to recognize that we have a God who is personal, with whom you and I can have a relationship and be dependent on this God. Foundational principles if you and I should live a life of integrity. Your character really matters.